Biopics, and particularly musical biopics, are some of the most formulaic movies that Hollywood pumps out. It seems like every year we get the same movie with a different artist that follows the same formula and makes the same rounds during the award season. It's a tired genre that has been stretched to its limits. But damn, I eat it up every time. I love a good musical biopic. They are one of my favorite movie genres. I don't care how much these kinds of movies get dragged by people online, I will always love them. Being able to see some of my favorite musicians' lives on screen is a treat, and I always look forward to the next one. However, there's an untapped goldmine of amazing musicians with engaging stories that have not been touched yet. Today, I'd like to share my top 10 musicians that deserve biopics. For this list, I tried to focus on musicians and bands that I think have interesting lives and stories. There's some big names and some big bands here, but also some that are not as popular. I tried to prioritize the musical acts that I feel had the greatest stories to tell, but I also factored in mainstream appeal as well. And keep in mind, I am condensing a lot of these musicians' lives into this video, so I can't touch on every big event with each entry. However, I implore you to do some more research into the artists that I mentioned because they are all very interesting and have engaging stories. Alright, enough talk, let's dive right in. First on the list is the queen of country herself, the iconic Dolly Parton. She's had an amazing career in music since the 60s and has received countless awards and honors. Just look at her Wikipedia page to get an idea of how much she has accomplished. What makes her story so engaging is that it's a true rags to riches story. Dolly grew up in a one-room cabin in the small town of Pittman Center, Tennessee, and grew up with 11 sisters and brothers. She began performing as a child, which eventually led her to the Grand Ole Opry, where she met Johnny Cash, who encouraged her to keep following music. After she graduated high school, she moved to Nashville the very next day, where she eventually found success as a country star. Of course, this is a quick abridged version of events, but shows you how her life fits the blueprint for a biopic so well. Over the years, Dolly has faced tons of scrutiny and sexism within the industry that she has always overcome, which makes her story so inspiring. Next, we have, in my opinion, the most underrated band of all time, with the Kinks. The history of the Kinks, and particularly the brother duo of Ray and Dave Davies, has been one marred with strife and drama. There's tons of crazy anecdotes from the band that make great material for a movie or even a miniseries. For example, how they invented new guitar tones by Dave slashing his amps for the song You Really Got Me, how they got banned from the US for being too raunchy, that time drummer Mick Avery threw a cymbal at Dave Davies and thought he killed him so he hid from the law, that time they stayed at famous serial killer John Wayne Gacy's house during a tour, or that time when John Lennon told Ray Davies he was the most obnoxious man he ever met. The hook of the film, however, would be the relationship between Dave and Ray, who are always at odds with each other and fighting constantly. This band is ripe for a juicy and crazy biopic. In the same vein, you could also make a biopic of the band Oasis, who are basically just the Kinks of the 90s. The character Charlie from the TV show Lost is an amalgamation of these two bands, so it shows how this concept already works on the screen. At its heart, it's a story of two brothers who never really grew up. Waylon Jennings lived a crazy life that represents the outlaw country that he played. Waylon's first recording session was with Buddy Holly, and he began to play bass in his backup band while they went on tour. Waylon was originally supposed to be on that ill-fated flight, but he lost his seat to Ritchie Valens in a coin toss. After taking some years away from music, he returned to the scene as a solo country artist where he found both success and turmoil. He helped usher in the outlaw country genre and sold millions of records, but at the same time he also wrestled with drug and money problems, which are unfortunately too common in the industry. However, he overcame these challenges and persevered, even forming the iconic supergroup The Highwaymen with Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson, and Chris Christopherson. Waylon Jennings' life is insane and deserves its own movie. Stevie Wonder is the greatest musician of all time. Don't even try to debate me, it's not a contest. Wonder was born 6 weeks mature, which was a contributing factor which led to him developing retinopathy of prematurity and losing his eyesight. Wonder began playing several instruments at a young age, including piano, harmonica, and drums. Little Stevie Wonder's skill was apparent when he wrote his first song at age 11, which got him signed to Motown Records. 2 years later, he had a #1 hit with Fingertips and became the youngest person ever to top the charts. This was just the beginning for Stevie Wonder, as he went on to top the charts 9 more times throughout his career and released some of the greatest albums of all time. He's become one of the best-selling artists of all time and has won 25 Grammy Awards. Not only is he a monumental figure in the music world, but he is also a notable activist and civil rights icon. He has overcome so much in his life, and it's insane that there hasn't been a film about him yet. Now onto a legendary, mysterious, and mythical figure that has influenced generations. Robert Johnson. Robert Johnson is well known for the Faustian legend of selling his soul to the devil in exchange for guitar prowess. The story goes that a young Robert Johnson yearned to be a great musician, so someone told him to go to a crossroad at midnight. When he got there, he was met by a large black man who took his guitar and tuned it for him. The man played him a song and gave the guitar back to Robert, who then gained complete mastery over the instrument. There's been a few interpretations of the story on screen, such as the character of Tommy Johnson in Oh Brother Where Art Thou. However, there's never been a proper biopic of his life and legend. Additionally, Robert Johnson is said to be the first death in the infamous 27 Club. Robert's death is also a mystery in itself, as there are various accounts on what really happened that night. There are a lot of interesting aspects and stories surrounding Robert Johnson's life that would be basis for a really great movie, in my opinion. It's crazy to me that Fleetwood Mac has not gotten the biopic treatment yet, given how well known their story and drama is. Recently, the TV miniseries, Daisy Jones and the Six, has taken great inspiration from Fleetwood Mac's troubled history, and that show has acted as a stand-in for a Fleetwood Mac biopic until we hopefully get the real thing. Everyone who has listened to Fleetwood Mac's rumors has most likely heard the behind-the-scenes stories of the band creating the iconic album. The film could focus on the creation of this album and be told through the point of view of Stevie Nicks. Recently, The Blacklist had a script on it which fits that exact description back in 2019, so there is a possibility we will see a film eventually. However, the film would paint certain band members in a bad light, which would anger those being portrayed, so it may be unlikely we'll see one for a while. I feel like this is a case with a lot of bands on this list, as the band members don't want to sign the rights away to their music and likeness if they're being portrayed in a bad light. That's why the Queen biopic Bohemian Rhapsody felt so sanitized. None of the actual members of Queen wanted to look bad, so they made sure that they were portrayed in a good light within the movie. Now on to another band that I'm surprised hasn't received a big Hollywood movie yet. The Beatles. There's been lots of movies made about the Beatles, but most of those have been TV movies and movies not directly focused on the band, such as Nowhere Boy and Yesterday. This is the biggest band of all time, and they deserve a big Hollywood movie to tell the story. Just imagine the numbers this movie would make. If Bohemian Rhapsody made almost $1 billion, then a Beatles movie would easily cross $1 billion. You think since Paul McCartney likes money so much, he would jump on the chance to make it happen. Make a movie focusing on the Beatles' most popular years and cast 4 of Hollywood's white boys of the month, and it's basically a money printing machine. I mean, what else is there to say?
We're nothing but grains of sand.
That was freaking transcendental, Paul McCartney.
Warren Zevon is known among most people for just being the guy who made Werewolves of London, but he is truly one of the most talented songwriters ever, and he lived a crazy life. Before a career in music, Zevon worked as a bookie for the notorious mobster Mickey Cohen and the Cohen crime family in LA. Zevon worked as a session musician and jingle writer for many years and even toured with the Everly Brothers. However, he didn't see much success in the realm of music and had dissatisfaction in his career, so he moved to Spain in the summer of 1975. In Spain, he lived and played in a small tavern owned by a former mercenary, David Lindell. When he returned to LA years later, he roomed with the Fleetwood Mac members Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham, who helped contribute to Warren Zevon's first album along with other famous musicians. However, Zevon didn't see much commercial success until his second album, Excitable Boy, when he was convinced to record a joke song that he had written, Werewolves of London. This is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Warren Zevon lore, as I implore you to check out some of his story and his music, which is criminally underrated. One of the most tragic stories in rock history is the story of the band Badfinger. After the Beatles broke up, there was a vacuum in the music world, hungry for a new British boy band to fill that void. Badfinger fit into that role immediately, even being one of the first music acts to be signed to the Beatles' new Apple Records. However, with their new success, they also faced new challenges. The main one being Apple Records folding in 1973, which resulted in Badfinger taking on the weight of legal and financial troubles. Worse yet, they were conned out of all their money and rights by the man who they hired to be their manager, Stan Pauley. This directly led to guitarist Pete Ham sadly taking his own life. In his final note, he wrote, "Anne, I love you, Blair, I love you. I will not be allowed to love and trust everybody. This is better. P.S. Stan Polly is a soulless bastard. I will take him with me. Sadly, bassist Tom Evans would also take his own life years later as well. The story of Badfinger is very reminiscent of the story told in the recent biopic, The Iron Claw, which focuses on the Von Erich family. These are both stories told about a family that were on the top of the world that came to a grinding halt after a series of tragedies. Now, before I reveal my number one artist that I think deserve a biopic, I wanted to note some honorable mentions that I think also deserve movies, but didn't quite make my top 10 list. Those would be Talking Heads, Townes Van Zandt, Kurt Cobain, Janis Joplin, and Jim Croce. I don't have time to dive into each of their stories, but if you research them, then you will know they would all make great films as well. Finally, the artist whose biopic I've always wanted to see and I think has so much potential. Creedence Clearwater Revival. The story would work best by focusing on the lead singer, guitarist, and writer of the band, John Fogerty. It is a story about a group of friends who started a band that was launched into superstardom. However, conflicts within the band and a manager with ill intent led to their breakup. Ironically, contrary to most of the musicians on the list, they were not plagued with drug problems, as they are often referred to as the Boy Scouts of rock and roll. Their drama comes from a different place. Similar to the Kinks and Oasis, there's a duo of brothers in the band with John and Tom Fogerty, who were often at odds with each other. They played at Woodstock, they released the soundtrack of the Vietnam War, and they had their fair share of legal and financial problems, brought on by their manager Saul Zaentz. The fallout of the band had its own host of problems, such as John Fogerty losing the rights to all the songs he wrote while in the band, and his solo music landing him a lawsuit by Zaentz for sounding too much like CCR. It's a very interesting story, and one that has potential to be huge, as CCR is one of the biggest bands of all time. So, that's my list. Are there any musicians or bands that come to mind that I missed? This has been Tom from Eisenhower Productions, and thank you for watching. See you next time.